we are.
Second edition of the College Football Playoff Rankings coming out. The 12-member committee meeting in Grapevine, Texas to sort through and see what type of changes they might make after they got the Greg McElroy seal of approval for their initial rankings. Rare as that might be. Glad to have you with us. Reese Davis along with Booger McFarland, Joey Galloway, and Greg McElroy. So as we await the second set of rankings, a lot of things to keep an eye on. What are your expectations?
Well, I'm thinking about the little guy this week. You know, Memphis lost to Tulane. So now let's look at the other group of five. Let's look at James Madison. Let's look at USF. Which one of them are going to get that coveted spot this week? You know, Boog, I'm always thinking about the little people.
I appreciate that. Since you went little, I'm going all the way to the top. I'm going to see what happens with Indiana, Texas A&M. I thought A&M probably had a chance to be number one last week. They weren't there. Indiana in a really tough game, but they found a way to win. Whereas A&M goes on the road and get a ranked win against Missouri. I want to see what they do with those two teams.
You know, I think the big thing is the committee sometimes boxes themselves in. Utah, I think, is an example of boxing in a Big 12 team. BYU loses, they can't fall below Utah. Utah sits at 13. I also look at the gap between Notre Dame and Miami. Do they potentially adjust and reevaluate the strength of schedule, strength of record metric for Texas, Oklahoma, and Notre Dame, and maybe rearrange? So I think I'm very fascinated by those. And then lastly, Texas Tech. Can they slide up into the 5 spot, which is very coveted, with the win they had last week? Something
tells me that this week he won't like the rankings this week.
You think? I'm already on edge.
Exactly. Something tells me
it better be perfect today. I'm here to hear about it.
All right, let's break down once again. Most of you know this. Let's run through again. Slight changes this year in the college football playoff in terms of rankings and seedings. 12 teams make it. Now, those 12 teams made up of, as Joey pointed out to us earlier to remind us, it's the 5 highest ranked conference champions, no matter which conference. Doesn't have to be the Power 4. Then you have 7 at-large teams. I was grateful Joey thought of that. 4 highest ranked teams where we're seeing first round buys, and then as Greg mentioned, that 5 spot and really 6, 7, 8 also are coveted because that gives you a home playoff game. So there are a couple things to keep an eye on that the guys have alluded to. First, you want to watch as we start to unveil these rankings. Do we have a team outside of the Power 4 conferences ranked? And where's the highest ranked ACC team? College Football Playoff Top 25 is presented by Goodyear. Cincinnati wasn't ranked. They move in. They've got a big game next week against BYU if they get by Arizona this week at number 24. USF. Okay, so now this is important because South Florida out of the American group of 5 team that we didn't have ranked last week, this would presumably put them in the projected bracket.
Without a doubt, and they got a huge game coming up against Navy, but Alex Golish mixed all the coaching rumors, has his team playing at a high level. They run a play about every 15 to 17 seconds, and that kid right there, Brown, he is outstanding at the quarterback position. They are in prime shape right now, and I know down in Tampa, Florida, they're loving where they see themselves tonight.
Well, they've had trouble with Navy historically, and they've got them on the road coming up. Number 23. Tennessee made the initial rankings. They move up a couple of spots with the new teams in the field, just ahead of the Volunteers at 22. The Pittsburgh Panthers, College game day going there. They've got the game against Notre Dame, but more important for them, trying to win the ACC, Joey.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're playing Notre Dame this week, but after that, they go to Georgia Tech. They have Miami. This week, it only matters for the rankings, but after that, they control their own destiny. If they win the next 2 games, they got a chance to play for an ACC championship game.
Tell you the other thing I think it matters for ACC perception and how they might be viewed in the room.
No doubt.
If Pittsburgh could beat Notre Dame, which is going to be highly ranked, 21. Iowa, after that heartbreaking loss at the end against Oregon, they only fall 1 spot.
Well, this is important for Oregon because we know that the committee didn't really like Oregon where they placed them. Now you get a ranked win at Iowa, and they didn't drop Iowa, but 1 spot, Reese. That's big time for Oregon.
I think it's also appropriate. I mean, Iowa had a great chance to win that game. They played very well. Number 20. As we move on through these rankings presented by Goodyear. At number 20, Louisville, coming off a loss. They fall 5 spots. So there's the second ACC team we've seen.
And potentially a big one, too, because we have not seen Miami. And Louisville beat Miami head-to-head. But after the performance last week, losing to Cal, the way they lost to Cal, looking very, very human throughout that performance. That's a big shakeup there with Louisville dropping 5 spots.
19. Virginia. Now, Virginia, of course, still holding that head-to-head edge. They beat Louisville in a close game. They're 8-2. Virginia has Duke this week. That's a really big deal in the ACC. But Virginia, coming off a loss to Wake, they too dropped 5 spots. Just lurking and sneaking around the chicken coop. Michigan. If Michigan can get to the Ohio State game, win that game, they're going to have a great at-large case. They might find their way into the Big Ten championship.
I think when we talk about Michigan and Iowa still being ranked, and you talk about perception, Reese, I think this committee has a lot of respect for where the Big Ten is sitting. Michigan, we'll talk about USC. Also, those teams that could be that 4th spot to get into the playoff outside of the top 3 in the Big Ten.
17. Team that beat Michigan, one of their 2 losses. Michigan's 2 losses on the road to Oklahoma and to USC. USC, they've got a lot of weapons, including 2 number 80s who punt, although one of them just throws. Trojans up a couple.
And they have a great setup coming up next couple weeks.
Georgia Tech, another ACC team, is at number 16. The Yellow Jackets' only loss to North Carolina State on the road. Georgia Tech has some big games coming up. Have a chance to get Pitt themselves. Got Pitt coming to them. So see if Brent Key's team can get back on target there. At number 15, here's the Miami Hurricanes out of the ACC.
Without a doubt. And I know people look at Miami and the 2 losses that they have, but I love the fact that they're creeping up just a little bit. And I know they're going to be below Notre Dame. But, Reese, at some point, if they wind up both with 10-2 records, I think the committee at that point is going to have to look hard at the head-to-head. It's good to see them creep up a little bit this week.
I think this is an adjustment, probably an overcorrection off of having them a little too low last week.
Gotcha.
They were boxed out a little bit because of the head-to-head against Louisville. But to me, this is a far more appropriate spot for Miami to be based on their personnel and the way they lost those 2 games.
It's also really important to note that this is almost certainly the last ACC team we're going to see in the rankings. So when we project the bracket, that would put the Hurricanes into the field, assuming that is the case. Number 14. Remember, we're seeing the rankings right along with you. Vanderbilt Commodores, only loss at Alabama, at Texas. Diego Pavia and friends at 14, up a couple of spots, hoping to make an at-large case. That's their most likely way in. Seems like a stretch to get them into the SEC championship game. You talked about Utah. Utah staying firm at number 13 out of the Big 12.
You know, and this one, to me, I have a ton of respect for Utah. Their best moment, though, this year came in the dominating performance against Cincinnati. Their win against Arizona State was without Sam Leavitt, and that was convincing, of course, but without their quarterback. Other than that, it's G5 teams and teams that are below 500. I think Utah's a really good program. I think they're on the upswing. But at 13, man, it's just hard for me to get on board with them being that high.
Probably just a little bit of eye test right there in respect for the head coach, you would think.
Yeah, I agree with that, Boog. And they also might sort of be at a ceiling. That's another thing to think about. Number 12. BYU beat Utah. BYU takes a tumble 5 spots after Texas Tech really handled them in Lubbock. But the Cougars can earn their way back, win their way back, and perhaps get into the Big 12 championship game. And Texas Tech takes care of its business, perhaps a rematch in that conference title game. But right now, BYU will be on the outside looking in based on the bracketing rules. Number 11. The Oklahoma Sooners up a spot. Huge game at Alabama coming up.
Yeah, they got a chance to make a statement. Coming off of a bye week, now they have a shot to go to Alabama. The SEC gets interesting this weekend, and this is one of those games they have to play good defense. John Mateer.
Here's been running the football. Better last game, better than he has at any point this season at a season high in rushing yards. And the last time the Sooners played, number 10. Feel like this is going to be the Longhorns. Texas also has a test at Georgia. They've got only 1 loss in the SEC, and of course the opening loss against Ohio State.
Yeah, I think both SEC teams here, Texas and Oklahoma, have to feel great about where they're at right now. Texas especially, knowing you get 2 big opportunities in the next couple weeks. They'll go and play against Georgia this week on the road, then they'll welcome the top 3 team at worst in the Aggies to their place on Black Friday. So Texas with plenty of firepower to vault up, maybe not into the SEC championship race. If they went out, they could get there, but to host a home playoff game there by being ranked 5 through 8.
Long way to go. Texas splits those 2 games and plays well, they're going to have a good at-large case despite having 3 losses. But still a long way to go before everybody gets upset about that. Notre Dame is at Pittsburgh this week, fighting Irish up a spot to number 9. At number 8, the Oregon Ducks. Now remember, this cut line is going to be 10 this week because of the way everything fell out. So Texas is going to be the last at-large team in the field once we show you the projected bracket. Oregon up a spot after winning at Iowa in miserable weather conditions. Number 7. Hotty Toddy slips a spot. So that means Texas Tech is moving up. Ole Miss at number 7. How about number 6? There they are. The Red Raiders go up 2 spots after a dominant performance against BYU.
And I think you can make a case that they have a real argument to be made at 5. And while I love Georgia, I can look at the circumstances surrounding Texas Tech's loss and better understand knowing that Baron Morton was not out there playing. Offensively, I would like to have been a little better in the red zone. But other than that, defensively, the way they swarmed to the football, harassing the quarterback, stopping the run, that's a top 5 football team in my eyes.
That's the thing. Red zone touchdowns. Nobody has kicked more field goals in the red zone in the country than Texas Tech. Number 5. It's going to be Georgia, we believe. And it is. Bulldogs, as we mentioned, host Texas. Assume that Alabama, by virtue of that head-to-head win against Georgia, and the hot streak the Tide's been on since then, will be at 4, and they are. So now, do we have any drama at 3-2-1 after Indiana's near escape? A&M wins another impressive game on the road. Who's number 3? Texas A&M standing pat at number 3. Joey's grinning.
No. I don't mind them staying at 3 because they were 3 last week. You know, I felt last week about this Texas A&M team. I find them staying at number 3, sort of surprised, but judging by last week, it's okay.
Number 2, the Indiana Hoosiers. And I really respect what the committee did here. It's November. Everybody's going to have a game like that, as Ohio State is number 1, you would assume. And Indiana found a way to win it in dramatic fashion. I mean, he played a desperate team, nothing to lose. It still has NFL talent on defense and some on offense as well. The Hoosiers figured out how to do it. Okay, now, look at these rankings right here on the left before we fill in the bracket. The cut line is 10. Remember, you don't have to win your conference championship in order to get a bye, but the 5 highest ranked conference champions, regardless of which conference they come from, get into the field. That means that you have Miami from the ACC, South Florida from the American, who's actually in the rankings this week, unlike a week ago when no Group of 5 team was in the rankings. They make it into the field, meaning the at-large cut line comes right after Texas at number 11, and Oklahoma and BYU are the first 2 teams out of the field. So break this down for you and show you where the byes are. The 1 through 4, regardless of conference, get the byes. 2 from the Big Ten, 2 from the SEC. 5 through 8 get home games on campus, and these are coveted. The fans want these badly. So Georgia gets a bye, gets a home game. Also getting a home game, Texas Tech. That would be rowdy and fun based on my trip there last week. Ole Miss and Oregon also getting home games to start in the first round. The rest of the bracket, the matchups would look like this. That would put Golesh, the former Tennessee offensive coordinator, against Georgia. That would put Miami at 11 against Texas Tech on the road. Texas and Ole Miss, and then Notre Dame at Oregon right now. So that's how it would shake out for the second straight week. The cut line is at 10. We're going to dive into the ACC a little bit more right now. But I guess you guaranteed he wasn't going to like it.
It's fine. I mean, here's the thing. Honestly, I'm good with it. They stayed consistent, and I can live with that. I really can. I think that with what we saw from Texas Tech, they had a real strong argument to be made for the top 5. Because right now it feels like they're wedged out of the possibility of a first-round bye. And that, to me, I think Texas Tech is potentially a top 4 team.
Over Georgia, over Ole Miss.
I think you can
over Alabama.
Definitely over Ole Miss. I think you can make a case that Texas Tech, by the time we get to the end of the season, should have a chance to get one of those top 4 byes. I don't know if they will, based on how things are lining up right now in the Big Ten and the SEC.
Still a lot of ball to play.
Yeah. A lot of ball.
And it's a lot of games, a lot of
if we're diving in just a little deeper, too, what we should be talking about tonight is who is in the best position to get a home playoff game. Mm-hmm. And right now, with where Notre Dame is at, having Pitt in the top 25 still is very, very important, because that will provide potentially just enough firepower and strength to that resume to get Notre Dame to allow themselves to have a home game at South Bend. Right now, I don't know if that's possible, knowing what's right behind them. I don't think they control their own destiny.
You know who I think's in the best shot to get a home game right now, best spot? Ole Miss. because they're sitting there at 7. They've got Florida and Mississippi State.
Right.
And also because of their strength of schedule, they could still make the SEC championship game, but it doesn't seem likely.
Yeah.
So I think Ole Miss is sitting pretty to have a home playoff game on the Grove.
Well, no doubt. And I think if you're Ole Miss, although you're not extremely angry, Lane's probably a little bothered by being jumped this week. Because, you know, he talked about A&M probably should be number 1. I think he understands the type of gauntlet you go through in the SEC. And in a year when we're talking about not only good wins but good losses, Ole Miss's only loss is a near just a Trinidad Chambliss fourth quarter where he wasn't quite on it at Georgia. That's a good loss. And so I think if you're Ole Miss, although you're not angry, you might be a tad bit bothered by being jumped.
Here's what I've learned over the years, Reese, is we do this every year where we sort of forecast what these teams are going to do. And all this stuff changes. Somebody loses.
Yeah.
There's upsets that happen. That's why we knew Greg was going to be upset. I just knew we used the first week to get an idea of what the committee's thinking. And then we take that information and apply it to the next weeks. But we know always in week 2, we start saying, well, this team has a clear path. This team, they got
and
this
people
team,
always
that
lose.
team.
I get it. Yeah.
And people always lose. And all of the energy spent on that is like, and this is why I always say it's going to work itself out.
And another team I think to keep an eye on to work its way up into a potential at large discussion is USC.
Yeah.
USC's got a lot
in
of
a great
opportunities in front of them.
I think USC is, knowing that they still have a road trip to Oregon. That's massive. You get a home game against a ranked Iowa team this week. So I think there's plenty of firepower for SC to move up. The other thing that's fascinating here, and this is deep dive for just a half second.
Let's go then.
Miami is at 15.
Yeah.
There are some teams in front of them right now that have some challenging games coming up. Texas has 2 of them. They could fall behind. You see what could happen with BYU. They could lose another one, maybe on the road at Cincinnati. You see what happens with Utah. Maybe they lose one down the stretch. You look at what's sitting right in front of them. There's a possibility that Miami actually has a really strong at-large case to make, when in reality they won't even play in the ACC championship game.
That's if they handle their business. And this Miami
That's a
team,
big if.
That is the biggest if in this thing.
Yes.
It is not what everybody else got to do.
No,
You're
correct.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
But in the last 3-4 weeks, they haven't looked like it. And so as we keep, I think we're all holding on to what we've seen out of Miami early in the season and saying that is a really good football team. They have not played that good in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So they have to handle.
We've held on to it for 2 years, though, going all the way back last year.
Totally fair.
Okay, now
Absolutely
we're
right.
asking, can Carson Beck do what Cam Ward couldn't do, and that's be more consistent down the stretch? Because this is a very talented football team, but are they going to play to that level?
But Carson Beck went from consistent to very non-consistent.
Exactly.
So he's actually, when you look at Miami and look at their struggles, that's the first place you look.
Absolutely.
And their losses is the interceptions, the bad interceptions, the
What is
four
like
against
6
Louisville.
of their 9 turnovers. They only have 9 of the year in those 2 games.
Exactly.
But tell me right now, last week we had this conversation. Miami's got no shot. Guys, today they have a shot. Because if you look at what's sitting right in front of them, it is possible. Now, they need to be the biggest Pitt Panther fans in the world this weekend. If Pitt knocks off Notre Dame, that's one less team to worry about. And guess what? It strengthens your schedule because you play at Pitt in the final week of the regular season.
I got one for you. I know we're going to talk ACC a little bit later on. How about this? How about Miami makes it as an at-large, but whoever the ACC champion is gets squeezed out.
Yep.
By, I don't know, James Madison and the American.
Wow.
Just saying.
I don't think it's likely, but it is possible. Heather Dinich, who does such an unbelievable job covering the college football playoff for us. Heather, we can sit here and talk about wins, losses, strength of record, or record strength, as they call it now. What about the eye test in the room? What's going on in there?
Reese, there's evidence of how important the eye test is to this selection committee all over this ranking. And you're going to start with Indiana and Texas A&M. I guarantee you people in that room cared about Fernando Mendoza and how he willed Indiana to that win at Penn State, realizing it's a 3-6 Penn State team. Indiana's defense, Indiana's overall efficiency, number 3 in the country. How they're winning matters. How teams are losing matters. When you look at BYU dropping all the way to 12, it's because they had 67 yards rushing, 3 of 14 on third downs, 3 turnovers. They played so poorly, they played themselves out of the playoff. And Texas Tech played its way into range of getting one of those first-round buys. And what else that means for Texas Tech is the possibility, if it were to lose in the Big 12 championship game, because they're that high right now, that indicates they might have a little bit of wiggle room as the Big 12 runner-up. So I think that when you see this and you see how teams won and how teams lost, that's really important in that committee meeting room right now.
And also, you know, we were talking last week to underscore what you guys were talking about, how things change one week to the next. We're talking, hey, the Big 12, 2, Big 12, maybe 3. Now we do the projected bracket, which is going to change, and we see Big 12 1. You know, so it'll unfold. Mack Rhoades will join us in a matter of moments. He is the chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee to answer questions about the eye test, about the evaluation. Was there course correction on Miami? Mack will join us momentarily. And the fate of the ACC, we've alluded to it a couple of times. We'll deep dive in there as the ACC is struggling to get teams in the field.
College Football Playoff Top 25 is presented by Goodyear. Tried College Football Playoff Top 25 presented by Goodyear.
Take another look at the rankings and the projected bracket brought to you by Goodyear, just unveiled exclusively right here on College Football Playoff Top 25. Top 4 remain the same. In fact, that's also the case all the way through 5. Georgia, the last 2 teams into the bracket would be Miami. Miami not ranked in the top 12, the highest ranked ACC team. And then South Florida is in the field out of the American. Huge game against Navy this week. They would be the final team in as a projected champion of the American Conference. Mack Rhoades, who is the chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, joins us as he does every week. Mack, let's start. It was a scintillating finish. Indiana against Penn State. Texas A&M was dominant on the road. How would you describe the discussion, the evaluation between those two teams, particularly as it pertains to Indiana holding on to that 2 spot?
Yeah, one of our longer discussions in our meetings, and you know, Indiana, gave them the edge again defensively. We talked about that, last week. Certainly offensively as well. You think about Indiana's body of work and wins going at Oregon, against Oregon, at Eugene. The Iowa win. We certainly looked at the Texas A&M win in South Bend. That's a big win for them. The win versus Missouri on the road. Committee talked a little bit about Missouri, not the Missouri team that they've been. Their third quarterback, playing their third quarterback, a true freshman, and just Indiana found a way to find a way, and Mendoza, down the stretch, second, rated quarterback, passing efficiency. So those were all the things that we talked about and gave Indiana the edge.
Okay, Miami is the highest ranked team out of the ACC, and the ACC is a chaotic situation potentially, depending on how these last few weeks play out. It seems as if maybe there was a bit of a course correction on the ranking of the Hurricanes. I know a couple of teams lost, but you also have some head-to-head components to evaluate there. What was the discussion like on Miami?
Yeah, I mean, Miami, I think, Reese, you said it, we had some teams lose. And again, the conversation with Miami has been, about their consistency especially on offense. They've been really, really good, on defense. Obviously, the head-to-head with Notre Dame comes up, and so a lot of conversation about Notre Dame, 7 straight, better defensively than what they were at the beginning of the year. So all of those things played into it. We got great respect for Miami. When you think about the eye test, they're really talented, both sides of the ball. Just need to be a little bit more consistent on the offense.
What's keeping Texas Tech out of the top 4?
I think, what a convincing win against, BYU, both sides of the ball. I think, offensively, in the red zone, they've left some points off the board, kicked a lot of field goals. But Reese, they're a really good football team. Their front seven defensive, really, really tough kid. But, offensively is what's probably kept them out of the top 4, top 5.
Okay, Mac, I've got to ask you this one real quickly. Just want to circle back beyond Miami, the rest of the ACC. How does the committee evaluate the overall and relative strength of the ACC? And by the ACC, I mean the ACC teams you're ranking.
Yeah, so we really, we look at each team on its own. We don't look at, conferences. We look at each of the teams. And I think for the ACC, when you look at their non-conference schedule, there really are no signature wins other than Miami versus Notre Dame. And so when we're having that conversation, we look at, schedule strength, record strength. That's certainly one of the metrics that come to play.
Mac, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week as you guys issue more rankings, have more games to evaluate. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Reese.
All right, that's right. After starting it with a sack, led Indiana down the field. What a catch by Cooper. I've watched it 100 times. I think that's good in the NFL.
No doubt.
You got the second one down, too.
He got 2 feet down, 151 on the clock. What Mendoza did was absolutely outstanding on that drive.
If you break it down by conference, SEC and the rankings in terms of teams ranked, not in the bracket yet, but 8 teams from the SEC, that's half the conference is ranked. Texas A&M the highest at number 3, 3 of the top 5. Big Ten that's the top 2. 6 overall. We've talked about Michigan and SC with plenty of room to move up. Texas Tech is the only team in the projected bracket, but 4 Big 12 teams are ranked. And then there's the Atlantic Coast Conference, the ACC with 5 teams ranked, but the highest one is Miami, which faces quite the uphill battle to try to get into the conference championship game, meaning probably their best case isn't at large. And there, Heather, there's a doomsday scenario out there for the ACC champion for sure.
It's a doomsday scenario, Reese, but I want to pump the brakes on it because what we saw tonight was one group of 5 team, gentlemen. South Florida, right? Mm-hmm. If JMU had appeared tonight, I would say, okay, the possibility is a little bit more. But I promise you, in that selection committee meeting room, JMU ranked 115th in strength of schedule with 1 loss to Louisville that they dropped. Impacts that conversation. And last year you had a Boise State team that was taking up one of those top 12 spots, a really good G5 team. We're not seeing that this year. We're seeing a South Florida just appear in the ranking. And so when you see Miami there, pump the brakes on Miami too. They have a 6% chance of reaching the ACC championship game.
Here's the thing that I think is the doomsday, and it's Duke. Because
100%.
there are 2 teams in the ACC that control their path to the ACC championship game. One of them is Duke. The other one is Georgia Tech. If Duke wins its games, they're going to the conference championship game. They're explosive offensively. They can win it. They have 4 losses.
Correct.
And not that you count losses, but, they've got 3 non-conference losses. Yeah. That's where they're in the most danger. Otherwise, it's just a fun thing to talk about, I think.
But to that point, though, if Duke beats Georgia Tech in the ACC championship game, it all of a sudden has a win against the CFP top 25 team. The record strength improves, and we had a 3-loss ACC champ in the field.
Fair enough. I'm just saying that I think my only point is I don't think it'll happen. My point is they'll be holding their breath on selection day if James Madison wins out and it winds up to be Duke or Pitt for that matter. If Pitt gets, curb stomped by Notre Dame and then ends up winning the ACC, they're another one there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of possibilities here. And while I think the ACC is actually very consumable, the drama every week is amazing.
It's great.
It's a really fun league. However, the lack of a true elite team that is going to consistently perform does have me feeling a little underwhelmed. And I think the Duke scenario that you just laid out, Reese, is the best example of how this could get flipped on its head. They're already 5-4, fresh off a 4th quarter defeat to UConn last week. If Duke wins it, I think the committee will favor JMU because they stubbed their toe once, and it was underwhelming, and it was against another ACC team. But a 12-1 team that wins their conference against a 9-4 team that wins their conference, and that conference is already not held in the highest regard, I think the ACC needs to be very careful. I think the best chance right now might be for Miami to win out the rest of the way, pound people along the way, look really impressive, and then hope that there's a little bit of chaos and Tennessee beats Vandy, Oklahoma loses to Bama, and then you have Texas losing 1, maybe 2 down the stretch.
I'm not even sure they need that. I think if Miami just plays well, they're going to get in the mix, and that might be if you have the ACC championship that's a little bit different. They might say, okay, well, Miami could be innocent at large. They're the best team anyway.
And Miami's been given the benefit of the doubt because we think they're the most talented team in the ACC. I'm on the hand thinking the best team in the ACC is Georgia Tech. I get it. It may not look pretty, but I love what Brett Key and what Haynes King does on the field, how he plays. He's gotten better as a passer. And we can look at talent, or we can look at actually how these teams play on the field. I think Georgia Tech has played better on the field. I just love their physicality. I said in the first show we did, when we did it from home, this was a year not necessarily about the explosive plays. What can you count on when you get in these matchups? Georgia Tech and Haynes King, they can count on their physicality. You have to have something to hang your hat on. I don't know what Miami hangs their hat on other than talent. And they were talented last year. They're talented this year, and we're still waiting on them to put it together.
I agree with you, and I was going to say the same thing. I feel like we've moved past Georgia Tech as if they're not the best team in the ACC because they lost their last time. The last time we saw them, they lost the game. But before that, I would not say it's not been good. You know what I mean? Like, it is a good football team. The feeling that Haynes King has to carry them, and can he stay healthy?
Yeah.
That is the question you have with Georgia Tech. But if he can, I'm with you. I'm still on the Georgia Tech bandwagon because Miami hadn't looked great in the last month.
But, you know, here's the other thing, Heather. You might wind up with 2 teams in the field. I mean, Georgia Tech wins it. Miami gets in the large. They might wind up with 2.
Reese went from none
all
the way to 2.
The range of scenarios.
That's why you spin the ACC wheel of destiny. You don't know what's going to happen.
Georgia Tech can beat Georgia, and we can still have a different conversation about it. But I'm telling you,
in the problem with that loss, though, right?
But in the committee meeting room, there was an officiating call in that Wake Forest game that they're well aware of that helped them win that game. So there are some questions
we are in the weeds now.
We deep.
Heather,
I never would have thought that you would have brought us more in the weeds.
When we were looking at the bracket, the impact of the eye test, and we've got half of the committee members in there that either coached, played, or did both.
That's right.
You know, and not only college football, in the NFL.
Eye test is real strong, and they're taking us to the weeds in places. They did it last week. They did it again this week.
And that's the thing I was going to say.
O-line. They talk. We are way in the weeds, and Heather just drug us further into the weeds. I didn't know it was possible.
We went from dealing with computers to is the right guard firing off correctly to red zone. Like where are we at?
That's what it's about. They got film. They got coaches cut up.
That's a new metric next year. Red zone field goals. Don't like them.